Hi everyone, my name is Katie Lynn and I am a 7th and 8th grade online teacher for the Mason Middle School Virtual Academy. Go Cyber Comets. I am also one of the DEI leads at Mason Middle School, which stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This is my second year in that role, and I've been on our IE focus team at the middle school for 3 years. So this is work that I'm very passionate about. And as you know, it covers lots and lots and lots of different types of things and lots of different types of students. So please feel free if you ever need to reach out. You want feedback on a lesson, or you just want to bounce an idea off of me, I would be happy to do that. So today's lesson, or should I say, session rather, is creating safe and brave spaces online. So I've only been an online teacher since August. It's a very different role than what we did in the spring with remote learning. So I'm hoping that some of these nuggets are applicable, and maybe even in your in-person classes as well, you can find some relatability. So the biggest things, it's just best if there's an elephant in the room, they say to invite them in. So the barriers we have this year, and there's a lot of them. If you're an online school teacher, these were some of your barriers. The steep technology learning curve initially, having to get all the kinks worked out of Zoom. Am I going to use Zoom or Google Meet or both? Schools PLP, Buzz, Screencastify, Flipgrid. There's just so many different things, and we had to do it very quickly. We only see our students live 2 times per week at the 7 through 12 level. A lot of people aren't aware of that, so that's not a lot of time. The students have had the ability to turn their cameras off and on from day one. There's a lot of reasons behind that, but that certainly presents a lot of barriers in terms of getting facial cues from them. We have fewer wraparound and immediate intervention opportunities. We forget how powerful it can be to just keep a kid after class for 2 minutes and have a tiny bite-sized conversation, or the different cues we're getting if they come into class and they're groomed and then all of a sudden they stop taking care of themselves, or if we see them interacting with their friends and then all of a sudden they're sitting alone. Those are things you don't get to observe in the online environment. And our caseload is huge. Most of us content teachers have 195 to 200 plus. I have 199 right now. One of my peers in my department has 211. So it's really challenging. If you're in person and you eventually go remote or hybrid, these are some of your barriers. You are going to have a major disruption to your existing routines and procedures. And even if you've been intentional, there's a good chance that some of them won't transfer into an online environment. Schoology is a learning management system, and it is not a content distributor like Schools PLP or Buzz. So while we can get some or all of our lessons from Buzz and Schools PLP, Schoology doesn't house content. You have to build your content. Now, with that, I will say we do build a lot of content and upload it to Buzz, but we also do take some of the content that was provided to us. You will have a steep technology learning curve mid-semester, taking your classes and moving them online. And you are probably going to have students that are less engaged in authentic conversation due to your existing COVID-19 protocols, assigned seats, wearing of masks, etc. We have heard from in-building teachers that a lot of these things have really hindered those authentic class discussions that we're used to having. And what did the feedback say? According to student and family feedback collected by Dr. Buemiller at the end of the first quarter, students are craving 2 things: direct instruction and social connection. I really try and lean into the first one because I can't do a lot about the second option. I can do some things, but I have a lot more control over the direct instruction as a teacher. So I ask myself, and I ask all of you, am I being responsive to students and families' needs during this unprecedented school year? It's so much more than delivering content. It's so much more than making sure that students have enough work to complete at home. They are telling me they want me there modeling for them because that's what they're used to getting 5 days a week in the classroom, and they want to build relationships with their peers. So originally this session was supposed to be called Building brave spaces in an online classroom, but I actually changed it to safe spaces because we won't have brave spaces anywhere until we commit ourselves to having safe spaces. And that's in person and online. If your students feel like they're in a safe space and that you have their best interests and that every student feels that way, you can start having those brave conversations. But the first step is creating safe spaces. Some instructional moves and best practices that I hope definitely go in that online or remote environment, but maybe even in person. One thing I do is a Jamboard, and I have a question of the day. And if you've never used a Jamboard before, I highly recommend it. You can have up to 20 slides at a time. I only use 6, one for each of my classes. And what I'll do, and I apologize, I don't have any questions of the day up here today, but I will create a text box and ask a question. It has nothing to do with content. It might be something like, what's your favorite activity to do in the fall? If you could eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be, etc. And then I'll model it by doing my own sticky notes. So if I could eat one food for the rest of my life, I'm going to pick two. I would say steak and chocolate. And I hit save. And then the kids do that as well. And all you have to do is give them the link. It's immediately editable. And what's nice is I use the same post-it for all my classes and I just click to the next page for the next class. That's how I take attendance in my online classes. I do not waste any time taking oral attendance because I only get 45 minutes with these guys twice a week, 90 minutes, that's it. So I look at my Jamboards when class is over and then I mark up my rosters. And you get to see a little bit into their world and also they get to see into each other's. So that's just a fun, and you can do, lots of things with a Jamboard. One thing I have yet to try this, but I came up with this strategy is a digital jigsaw, which is a way to foster authentic discussion and practice oral speaking skills. So it takes a lot more logistical maneuvering and planning in advance. But if you do those things, you can have yourself a really great educated discussion for your students that is grounded in evidence. If you've never done a jigsaw in the classroom, it's essentially every student owns a different piece and they all kind of come together to make that puzzle and they teach each other. So online, you count your students off by ones, twos, and threes. You're a 1, you're a 2, you're a 3, and they need to know what number they are. You will assign an article reading as homework or prior to your next live class. So you would have to tell them this, like I see my 8th graders Tuesdays and Fridays. I would tell them this on Tuesday so they would be ready for class on Friday. You want to cover multiple perspectives on the same issue or topic. So they should read different pieces, but they should all be about the same general topic. For example, how has the coronavirus impacted different groups of people? That's my topic. Source 1, my ones would read Health Equity Considerations and Racial and Ethnic Minority Groups from the CDC. My twos would read Coronavirus, A Visual Guide to the Economic Impact by BBC News. And my threes would read Pods, Micro Schools, and Tutors, Can Parents Solve the Pandemic Crisis on Their Own, which is the New York Times. So they would know their number and they would read those resources in advance prior to the next class. When you're ready to have your live class, you can manually assign students to breakout rooms so that a 1, a 2, or a 3 is present in each one. It does take a little bit more time, but again, if you already have it mapped out in advance of who's a 1, 2, and 3, it won't take you that much time to just manually place them. And all you have to tell them is, guys, I'm going to put you in a breakout group in a second. You've got to wait patiently because I'm doing it manually today, and that just takes a little bit longer. And then you ensure that you've got ones from each source in each breakout group, so you've got your coverage. There is also a new feature in Zoom called Let Participants Choose. And so what you could do is say, I don't care what group you go into, but there needs to be a 1, a 2, and a 3 in each group. You know your students and the maturity and if they would actually follow that rule or not. So you could do the Let Participants Choose option as well. Then each student shares out their findings, and then and their research, and the group collectively answers discussion questions. So the ones would share what they learned, the twos would share their takeaways, and the threes would share their takeaways. And then maybe you would have given them discussion questions to answer all together in their breakout group. And then from there, you could come back together You could come back together, that might be the end of class, whatever. But that is how you can do a digital jigsaw and make sure that multiple perspectives are viewed and all students have voices to participate. Another thing I'm a fan of in the online environment, I just call it we do, you do, we do. If it's something that's either heavy content, like it's just heavy in nature, emotional, or we read something emotional, or it's challenging, and I know they're going to need more scaffolding. We discuss and preview that content all together. I would call it whole class, except for online. And then you can literally go off camera and set a timer and give students time to think, process, or write independently. I do this a lot in my live sessions. You can hit stop recording because obviously then it's just dead time in your video. You can play music. You can set a timer. What I do, it's 1:18 right now. Let's say if I wanted to give my students 5 minutes to read or write or process independently, I'd say I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to go on mute, and I want to see you guys back here at 1:24. And then they know they have 6 minutes in their own space to do whatever task I ask them to do. I have done this a lot, and the students are very receptive to coming back on. They understand that I give them a time, and then they will come back and meet me. So as long as you give them the parameters, that's pretty successful. And then you could send them into breakout rooms for a small group discussion. You could also bring them all back together. So the last we do could be we do it all together again, or we do it in small groups and talk about it. Deconstruct the traditional school model. Should you end up in a remote or hybrid situation, it is unlikely that you will be teaching live from 7:35 to 2:35. In fact, I teach a lot less live than I have ever in my career. We are really blowing up the rigidity of the school model. I will even say that is my least favorite part of being a teacher is the rigidity of the schedule. It just provides so many limitations when we have to have our eyes on the 25 to 30 other students in terms of pulling small groups, in terms of co-teaching, in terms of leaving to go to the restroom. We don't have a lot of flexibility, and that can be really frustrating. But man, if you are in a remote or hybrid model, you have lots of opportunities to differentiate due to the flexibility in your schedule. You can invite students into small groups, either need or interest based. You can set up sessions saying this is going to be a video session and we'll record it for anyone who is struggling with X, Y, and Z skill. Or maybe you want to launch just an interest based reading club that's totally not for a grade. You could do that because you will have space in your day for that. You can provide interventions without the stigma of a special class. How cool is it that you could, from your last assessment, pull all the kids that had D and Fs and not have to make an announcement in front of the class saying, if you got a D or an F, I will be pulling you. Because you can just send them a calendar invite and shoot them a message. And nobody has to see that they came into your little online class. So we can really break down barriers and stigmas if we are really intentional about this. You can collaborate with another department member to provide one-to-one and small group assistance. So my 8th grade online language arts teachers are Michaela Hahn and Lisa Spieler. We haven't done this yet, but since we all teach the same stuff and we share materials back and forth, one day I could invite the kids to my Zoom session who had scored the lowest on our recent assessment, and she could take the kids who scored the highest. It doesn't mean that they have to stay with Michaela for a call because just because they're on her roster. So you have that kind of flexibility. You can set office hours for management tasks, such as email, phone calls, updating grades, and answering questions. I highly recommend this because in the first quarter, I spent too many hours chained to my email, and I thought I was doing service to students, and I was. But I ended up answering a lot of the same questions over and over, and it was not a good use of my time. I have recently switched to something, and I will show you it on here. Sorry, I wanted to make sure you could see it. Called the Students Helping Students document. Give me just a second. I should have had it up. I apologize. Now, my 7th graders really haven't taken advantage of it, but my 8th graders have. Each week, I put the dates, and if the student has a question that they know other students will have, they can type it in this public document that's editable by all. If I haven't responded yet, or my student teacher, that's who Miss Weiss is, the students can answer for each other. And a lot of times their answers are better than mine because they are living the student view on Buzz and Schools PLP. So today I just had one about this one called the Dailies Quiz. And then each week I just delete the questions and change the date. So somewhere like that, that's kind of a dump document, can be really effective. That'll help you catch some of those questions that are common. Learn to pronounce all student names. And yes, it's much more challenging in a digital environment, and I'm not going to pretend to say that I know and can pronounce all the students' names. I have 199 of them. I don't, but I'm doing my best. And if I call on a kid's name and I'm pretty sure I botched it, I will ask them, can you please unmute and tell me if I said that correctly? And then on my roster, I will physically write the phonetic pronunciation. So the next time, I hopefully will do it better. And here's a little trick. My go-to phrase, because students are polite and a lot of them don't like to correct adults, you'll say, let's just say it's John and Johnny, and that's not even like an ethnic name. Do you like John or Johnny? And they'll say, it doesn't matter, whatever you want. You can say to them, it matters to me. It matters to me what I call you. So if you're mispronouncing a name and you mispronounce it more than once, and they say, it's fine, whatever, push back on them and say, it matters to me, because that's how we start to get it right and we get it better and we're more inclusive. Certainly promote the Safe Schools tip line. There is a new feature, most of you hopefully already know that, about reporting bias. The Safe Schools tip line is housed on masonohioschools.com, but if you click on the link that I put in the slideshow, it'll take you there. Students can text, use the web, email, or phone call, and they are absolutely allowed to leave their tip anonymously. Please post this electronically. Even if you're in person right now, please post it in Schoology and promote its use. Sorry, I think you can't see that. So mention it, encourage its use, mention it to your students so they know what it is. Identity exploration and exercises. We don't have a lot of time on here. And feel free to email me if you would like a copy of these. But something that's great to do is spending time acknowledging cultural and religious holidays. My family celebrates the Moon Festival in October, and so the day of the Moon Festival, I wished my students in my class, Happy Moon Festival. And one student who had not yet talked for the entire quarter stayed on the call with me afterwards, and we were talking about eating moon cake and how her family celebrates and how my family celebrates. That nugget wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have put a little bit of my own information out there. So if you click on this, it'll take you to a general calendar of religious holidays that Mason has put together. So this is something that maybe you didn't know was a resource, but this is for all of our staff. What you must do is honor student absences and make accommodations for missed work. That's a non-negotiable, just like it's a non-negotiable in the classroom. It is unrealistic to think that you will plan your entire semester around all of the different cultural and religious holidays. You won't be able to. So when you know that, or you find out even after the fact that a student missed your such and such because they were out of school for Diwali or Ramadan or whatever it is, just make sure that you accommodate that by giving them the time that they need to complete their missed work. That's a requirement. What you might do is what I suggested, share about your own personal customs and traditions. I will say doing this in the online environment is one of the only things that's going to make teenagers comfortable sharing about themselves. They're not elementary school kids. They don't like to blab about themselves. So a little bit of nudging and a little bit of sharing on your end can go a long way. Your Story Matters presentations. This is something I did last year in person, but I'm going to do it online also. Students had to, essentially it was an oral speaking exercise. So of course you could do this in a virtual environment over video. They had to select a personal artifact from their home that meant something to them. And it could have been related to their culture, a sport, a club, a hobby, their religion. It could be related to their family, really anything would go. And I called it middle school show and tell, or your story matters presentations. And they had to speak in front of the class for 1 to 3 minutes and tell their story. They had to tell a story of why it was important to them. And I just got the coolest different artifacts. One student who's a junior Olympic swimmer talked about his water bottle, how he takes it to every practice, and it's like his good luck charm. One student talked about why in 8th grade, for the first time, she started wearing her hijab every day to class. And then the benefit as a language arts teacher is you also can assess their oral speaking skills. Now, if you're not doing this for an oral speaking grade, you really don't need to give them much time to practice in advance. But if you are doing this as a way for them to practice public speaking and that's one of your standards, I would recommend you model it for them, maybe show them a couple of examples, do it yourself, and then give them a few days notice so they can get comfortable. It's something that you could do live and but know that it would take a lot of class time, or they could do it over something like Flipgrid. So I already said that. Identity Iceberg. This actually comes from a corporate professional book, but this is sort of like a makeshift learner profile. I'm not as interested in sharing that part with you, but the back of it, the inspiration comes from the metaphor of an iceberg. 13%, only 13% of who we are is visible, essentially, to those around us. Just like in an iceberg, the peak is only 13%, and 87% of it is underwater, and we have no idea what that is. So you can ask students to complete an identity iceberg to start fleshing out those traits that are below the surface, That might be certain things like their level of education, their political views, their religion, their family heritage, their sexual orientation, their mental capabilities, their nationality, etc. What you see is their skin color, their race, where they go to school. You see, for most of them, you can see what gender they identify with. You can see from their clothing and their belongings, you can probably guess what, their socioeconomic status is. And a lot of that other really important information lies below the surface. So even though they're in middle school and high school, doing these identity exercises is still really important. There was a learner profile, and all credit goes to Dan Little, where students, this one is mine, but essentially you do a slide and you make the entire slideshow editable and you give every student their own slide. So again, Dan Little is amazing. He came up with this. But this was helpful to me in getting to learn about students' different interests and hobbies. It's loading very, very slowly. We're just gonna exit out of that. If you need to see it, just message me and I will send you a copy of it. So I'm going to wrap this up. Some further reading. These articles, 5 tips for creating anti-racist brave spaces via distance learning, teaching tough topics, helpful tips for covering sensitive issues in the social studies classroom. This conversation is anti-racist from Teaching Tolerance, helping students and educators recover from COVID-19 trauma, NEA Today. Be in the Change. You can borrow my copy. It's by Sarah K. Ahmed. There are free quarterly magazines. I highly suggest you subscribe to those from Teaching Tolerance. And here are some great people that I follow on the subject of inclusive excellence. Again, I'm Katie Lynn. Thanks for listening to my presentation. If you would like a copy of this slideshow, just shoot me an email and I will send it to you. Have a great day.